Okay. Uh, all right. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending this lecture. This is about Alfred Stieglitz, and as I said before, he's not exactly a household name in the United States anymore, but I think he's still one of the most important people regarding photography. So we'd ask, well, why do we care? Why do we bother studying this fellow anyway? Well, his main claim to fame is that he was instrumental in getting photography accepted as a standalone art form in the United States. He was also instrumental in introducing appreciation of abstract art in general, both in photography and painting in the United States. He had some unique qualifications that we'll see that allowed him to do this. And we'll go on from there. Now, if you have questions, you can go ahead and interrupt. If I can't answer it quickly, then we'll save it and readdress it at the end. So you don't have to be shy. We're not a big group. So let me continue. All right, this is a portrait of Stieglitz by Gertrude Cassabayer, who's a contemporary of his and at the time a close friend and confidant. He had many dealings with her professionally. This is him as a young man, 1902. So he was in his 20s at that time.
I'm not seeing it. Is everybody seeing it?
Why?
I can see it.
No, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I got it.
I'm trying all the views, speaker view.
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Okay, got it. Great, thanks.
All right. All right. Just to let you know, this is for mature adults. So if you got any grandchildren or great grandchildren there, you might have let them go in the other room and play with their computers or phones. You know. Some interesting stuff coming up. All right, Stieglitz, as born in Hoboken, New Jersey, 1864 during the Civil War, and he was taken to Germany, 1881, by his father with the rest of the family, and we'll be talking about the father on the next slide. While there, he's in this very prestigious university, the King's Technical School or something, high school. And one of the graduates of that school is John Roebling, who designed the Brooklyn Bridge, among others. It's a very prestigious institution at that time. And he began studying under a professor, this Vogel, who was well known around Europe. Now, when he's in Berlin at this time, the city is a whirlwind. 1870, you have the Franco-Prussian War. The Prussians are victorious. They established the German Empire in Versailles in the Hall of Mirrors, united under Kaiser Wilhelm I, and with the Chancellor Bismarck. Well, this unification just unleashes a lot of economic and creative forces inside Germany. And in 1870, Berlin has 200,000 people. London has over 1 million, and Paris close to 1 million. So the Germans said, well, we have to have a capital worthy of our new empire. So, of course, they selected Berlin, being it was in Prussia. And Berlin, by the way, had been started by Frederick the Great in the 18th century as a military base for training and housing his army. The court itself was in Potsdam, which is some distance away from Berlin. So it wasn't a first-class city at all. So the government poured money into Berlin. They built universities and libraries and stadiums and all sorts of public buildings. And they, of course, introduced infrastructure. They had the best rapid transit in Europe. They had the best phone system in Europe, all because it was new.
Mm.
And they also provided a lot of parkland. If you've ever been to Berlin, it's got a large area devoted to parks as well. So it was in this whirlwind when that Stieglitz finds himself. Siemens is headquartered in Berlin, the German manufacturer. So it's at a time where it's as if Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. were together in the same place.
Mm.
That's how intense it is. And you can imagine the effect on a young man in his 20s who is very passionate about photography and is going to a prestigious university. So he is going to be on a very steep learning curve, and he's there for a number of years. So he's getting an experience, an education that really no other American's going to have. And looking down, he traveled around Europe through 1890, and we'll see some pictures of him from Italy, and he wins a number of awards. So he comes back as a mature photographer, and really ready to take his place in the United States. Now let's go on. This is a very important guy. This is Edward Stieglitz, the father of Alfred. He came from Germany and immigrated in the 1840s to the United States. Two brothers had already gone ahead of him. The 1840s were a tumultuous period in Europe. You had the revolutions, 1848. The old system was starting to fall apart, and some of these aristocracies, they had the grand constitutions to the populace for the first time. But it caused a lot of disturbance, and there was a lot of immigration. A disproportionate number of these people were Jewish. And why, we don't exactly know, but they may have gotten a little nervous in the tumultuous goings on there. But they did not leave for reasons of persecution or hardship. Most of these people were actually, could be considered middle class. They were decently educated. They had some resources. If they didn't go to college, they had a trade of some kind. So they came fairly well prepared, and they were very successful. The two most successful that come to mind are the Strauss brothers. Isidor Strauss started Macy's in New York and was also an elected congressman. Unfortunately, he and his wife perished on the Titanic. And he had a brother, Oscar, who was the first Jew to be included in a cabinet as a cabinet secretary, and he was so under Theodore Roosevelt. So as a group, they were very successful, and they should not be confused with a second Jewish wave of immigration later on in the 19th century, in the 1880s, 90s, that came from Tsarist Russia. And they fled harsh persecution. And they're the ones who are in the Lower East Side, okay? These are the Fiddler on the Roof crowd. But they the Stieglitzes would never have contact or really anything to do with these people. There were two different groups entirely. Anyway, this Edward was he was a bon vivant. He liked his wine and good food. He liked horse racing. He owned a horse. The family had a house up in Lake George. They go to Saratoga. He was very successful in business. He was in the garment business. He had made several changes in his life, but garments was his most successful one. He briefly served in the military in the Civil War, but his unit early on was dissolved for various reasons, and he was allowed then to buy his way out of the Army for $300, which he did. And so he made a lot of money during the Civil War, providing, for the Union troops. Initially, they tried to get Alfred, the oldest, educated in the United States. He briefly went to City College, actually. But it was becoming apparent he couldn't get what he wanted. And so Edward and a friend of Edward's recommended this school in Germany. So he just took the family there, not just Alfred, but the whole family, and their children, wife, and a nanny, and so forth. And the family stayed there some months, and then Alfred continued school, and he had two brothers that went to school there. Leopold, who became a doctor, and Julius, who became a chemist, and they both had very successful careers. And he had three sisters, and they were also successful. Unfortunately, one died early on in childbirth. The other two had quite a few children and had successful marriages. So that's more or less the situation he had as a young child. Now, his father was not without faults. He could have a bad temper. Sometimes he quarreled with his wife over small matters. And he also was running after the chambermaid from time to time. So that caused some friction. But overall, he certainly provided for the family and spent a lot of money on his child's education. You can't fault him for that. So he was a big influence on Stieglitz's life. So we have Stieglitz as a whirlwind in Berlin, plus really the example his father set of getting things done. Now let's look at this. One of his early successes. This is Paula, and it has some other names as well. And I said Paula was frankly a prostitute that he picked up in a bar somewhere, and became infatuated with this woman, and basically took her into his apartment, because his father had an apartment for him in Berlin. And we want to note some of the things in this photograph. We see some on the wall here. We see two photos of an impending storm, which Stieglitz has taken as probably first cloud pictures. We see images in white of Paula. Here's a more informal one of her lying down. Here's another image of Paula. You see Paula is dressed in her Sunday best and is writing a letter. And over here, there is an image of Stieglitz over by that heart. And finally, we have two birds in a cage. Now this, in total, this is an allegory. It's trying to tell a story. And we have these sun rays coming through the window. and it's saying that we have two individuals who are in a certain situation which is not going to last because one of those birds can open the cage and the other can't. Um, Let me move it down a bit. And we know her name, Paula Bauschmied. Photos on the wall, the approaching storm, and photos on the table, two birds, Paul in her Sunday best. He also called it a study in light and shade or sunlit and shadow. And it was published widely. I mean, go back to second. Look at the exposure here. I mean, that's a hard picture to take. So he must have had I would say, a very long exposure, and I don't know, f8 or because he's got some depth of field there. I mean, everything looks pretty much in focus, and you're taking something in low light, and you're using 1889 equipment. So that's, and then here's a man in his 20s, 64, 74, 84. Yeah, he's 25 years old. Now, I do take umbrage with the fact that he calls it study of light and shade. If it's a study of light and shade, you don't need all this paraphernalia on the wall. A few years ago, I got to see Whistler's mother, and Whistler's mother is called An Arrangement in Gray and Black #1. That's the actual title. And James Whistler always took exception to the fact that people thought it was about his mother. So it has nothing to do with his mother. And you'll see there's only one picture on the wall, then there's a small part of another one. And the rest is all this gray, black, a little bit of brown. That is an arrangement of gray and black. So I think Stieglitz really was making kind of an homage to Paula, knowing that he was going to leave her very shortly. And he did. He did send money to her for a number of years afterwards. As far as we know, she supposedly found somebody else, but let's hope she did. Anyway, let's moving on here. Now here is another early important work of his. He's traveling around Italy, and the reason this got such great reception is that back then you don't have many spontaneous images. I mean, he was going around Italy taking pictures, and I guess he just noticed these women and young boys standing. I guess I don't know, she's getting water there or something, and laughing. And look at this kid in the middle. I mean, he's laughing his head off. So, and the other girls also looking at the photographer, but this was considered a great success. With the limitations of the equipment, this is a great picture. And the significance of the work, again, it's capturing fleeting emotions. This is considered a technical and artistic triumph. Candid realism, and this foreshadowed his more famous street photography. He was certainly committed to what he called straight photography, as opposed to the old pictorial school that was trying to imitate painters. Technical mastery of the situation, that's for sure. So anyway, it was widely published, and it won awards for him. Certainly made him noteworthy both in Europe and the United States. and it was his first major international prize. And this is his most really creative period, and he wins. I think he won over 150 medals and competitions and whatnot. In his early days. All the while, he's becoming more and more known and more respected in the photography world. And this is what he's using. And these are the small cameras. You know, you compare this to your iPhone, you know, it's amazing that he could do anything with that. And I said, then the larger one was 12 by 12, and you needed a tripod for that. But these you were supposed to be able to hold in your hand. I'm glad I wasn't there. Anyway, he gets back to the United States, and now we'll see some of his prints. Again, these are not really candid because he knows what's going to happen. This is a trolley car dragged by horses in 1892. If you look at the top of it, it says Harlem. That's where it's going. And you see the steam coming off the horses. But he knew that these trolleys would turn around at this point, you know, because that's where the tracks were. One thing. So he just waited until he got a decent picture. Of course, we're seeing the successful pictures. I wonder how many did he take to get this one? Who we'll never know, but I'm sure it took more than one. And here's another one. This is on Fifth Avenue, New York. They didn't do a very good job of cleaning the streets. But he said he waited in the snow for 3 hours, waiting for this vehicle to show up. And it looks like it's still snowing. But this also was, considered a very good photograph at that time. Anyway, when he comes back to New York, at first his father tries to, kind of get him an honest job. And he had a friend who owned a company that was trying to make film, and he invested in that company. And Alfred was supposed to be a manager, and it didn't work out at all. He just fought with people and criticized people. He really wasn't a people person. I mean, if it was football, he had to be owner, general manager, and quarterback. That's the way he worked. And he was a passionate fanatic about it. But he must have had some charisma because he got people to follow him, and very talented people. So there must have been something about the man that got them interested with it, working with him. And the other thing is that because of his education and all he had done in Germany, he just knew more than most people. And he was taking pictures that other people weren't taking at that time. So anyway, he goes on. You can see he's reorganizing some photography clubs. He founds this photo secession group, and that word it comes from Europe too. There was say they use the same phrase in Europe, both for photography and artistic work as painters as well. And then he publishes the first issue of Camera Work, which was the go-to publication at that time for artistic photography, at least in the United States. And there's an example of Camera Work. Now he together with Ed Steichen, they start this gallery at 291 Fifth Avenue. and he'll call subsequent galleries 291, even though they're no longer at that address. And Steichen is a great guy. We'll talk more about him later. And they worked together closely for a number of years. But again, he was so headstrong and getting his own way. Eventually, Edward Steichen moved on and followed his own career. Stieglitz was also very preachy. He believed in art for art's sake, and he detested the so-called commercial world, and you shouldn't be taking photographs just to sell them, that kind of thing. Well, that's easy to say when your father's paying all the bills. Other people needed to make a living, so there's a little bit of hypocrisy there to me. And also, he did have contacts in Europe, and some of them came through Steichen. He had contacts too. They began to show European works, paintings, as well as photography, and even later on sculptures. As you could. And then 1913, that is the Great Armory Show, probably certainly the most important art exhibition in the first half of the 20th century. It introduced America to hundreds of avant-garde work from Europe, and that Stieglitz was part of that, and his photographs were a big part of it. And that's also the time he meets Georgia O'Keeffe. She sent charcoal drawings to him via a friend who was a confidant of Stieglitz. And supposedly when he opens the package, he says, at last, a woman on paper. He said he was looking for a woman artist to promote. Anyway, unfortunately, World War I really hurts Stieglitz's operation because people aren't buying artworks with the World War going on, and certainly getting any paintings or anything from Europe was impossible. So he winds up closing 291 in 1917. And I think camera work also ceases publication. Now he starts his photographing Georgia O'Keeffe and takes hundreds of pictures of her. And we'll look at some later. And they were really living off his allowance from his family and his wife's finances. His first wife, Emmeline, her family was rich. They were in brewing. I guess they came from Germany, so they were in brewing beer. And they're quite wealthy, and it was arranged marriage. And it never really worked out. She wasn't an artist. She wasn't interested in art. He wanted to go to a museum. She wanted to go shopping. They went to Venice. He's taking pictures from the water, from a gondolier, and she's just complaining that it smells. So they were just chalk and cheese. There was just no way this was going to work out. They did have a child. They had a daughter named Kitty. And at first, Stieglitz tries to have it both ways, both Georgia O'Keeffe without divorcing Emmeline. And, but finally all his his scheme falls apart, and they split in 1924. And by that time, also, a lot of her fortune was gone because Prohibition had come. But anyway, so he goes on and he'll marry Georgia O'Keeffe. Referring to clouds photos as equivalents, yes, he takes lots of pictures of clouds. He was doing this to show that photography could be abstract, as well as say straight photography, I guess. He reopens a gallery in 1930, the American Place, and that's quite successful. And he said he had that open he opened until he died. In the last 10 years of his life, though, he was quite ill, and almost died in 1937 from pneumonia. George O'Keeffe, by the way, spent about half her time in New Mexico, and she would make sure that a housekeeper or somebody would look in at Stieglitz to make sure he was okay. But eventually, he was living off of O'Keeffe's success, which, by the way, he was really part of, because she was very headstrong, proud woman herself, and she hated to admit that she needed Stieglitz, but she did, and she didn't know the art scene in New York. So anyway, she admitted she was 50 years old before she wrote a check. So she wasn't financially literate. Stieglitz insisted that she should only sell to collectors, because there were other guys who were going around buying paintings and flipping them and really destroying the subsequent market for an artist. And his strategy worked, and there were a number of people who would continually buy George O'Keeffe's work over the years, and they were serious collectors, not people who were just going to flip it into the open market and for a quick buck. So she owes a lot of her success to the way he managed her career. All right, and here's some images of Stieglitz. This is a very famous one, The Hand of Man. I mean, look at those rails. That really kind of draw you into the picture. The Flatiron Building, very famous building in New York. I think it's on 17th Street. And he took many, many pictures of this, even in the snow at night. And right now, that building is being renovated and turned into apartments. And if you've got a few $1,000,000, you can get a floor in the Flatiron Building. Again, this is, I think this is Belmont Racetrack, 1904. He loved horse racing. And as I said, so did his father. And so he managed to get this photograph showing a race going on. Now I couldn't see an author for this picture, but I would bet it was Ed Steichen. Stieglitz was passionate to the point of being reckless. And he would do anything for a photograph. And it looks like he's lucky he didn't fall into the river. I know he's on, I don't know which bridge he's on, 1905. Could be the Brooklyn Bridge. And here's again, the steerage, again, a very famous photograph. Stieglitz insists that it was the lines. You have a line across the top. You got the stairway. You've got the gangway going across the middle, and you've got a mast coming down on the left, and then you've got this fellow with the straw hat. That's what he says attracted him to the picture. It's really not a picture of immigrants at all. And I would agree with him. I think he's telling the truth this time because he didn't think that photographers should, spend their time for social causes. So he didn't like what Paul Strand would be doing later on, or Jacob Riis, or people like that. It should be art for art's sake. And I made a few notes on that. It says, you may call this crowd a crowd of immigrants. To me, it's a study in the mathematical lines and balance and a pattern of light and shade. So that's the way he thought. And I guess he applied that to all his images. And this is just a casual shot of Paris in 1910. City of Ambition, another very famous painting. This is a ferry, probably from Hoboken or Weehawken, going across the river. That building is the old Singer building. That was torn down in the 1960s, Singer sewing machine, with the cupola on top. Another shot of New York, the new high-rise buildings becoming to dominate the old buildings, and I'm sure all those old buildings are long gone. I'm not sure where this is. And now some Georgia O'Keeffe. That's an example of the hands. He did her hands, feet, and other parts of her body, as we'll see. But I read where a Georgia O'Keeffe hands picture, an original print, recently sold for $1.5 million. So there are some people out there who are still collecting them, or collecting her, I guess. So it's amazing after all these years. It's not something you would read about, in most art magazines. This I included because this is a mistake. Dorothy True was a friend of O'Keeffe's, and it's a double exposure. And taking a picture of this woman's leg, and Dorothy True's face pops up in it. But I think it got published as just a curiosity. Now here's Stieglitz, a torso picture of O'Keeffe. I tried to enhance it a little bit in Photoshop to see what it would look like. She was certainly in shape, very muscular. But notice how he cuts off her top and cuts off her knees and just does the torso, which is kind of different. But he took thousands of pictures of O'Keeffe. Most of them, I think a lot of the O'Keeffe pictures are in New Mexico. There's a O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe. Here's another. He loved this black and white contrast, and she's wearing a man's hat. Kind of give her a very forceful look. She looks like almost a disdainful look, I think. But again, this is a very well-known picture. Now we're getting I said he didn't do much creative work. This is one I thought I'd throw in from 1935. This is from the Shelton Hotel, and the hotel was originally built in the early 20s for young men who were working on Wall Street. So it had a lot of amenities, a pool, a gym, cafeteria, and so forth. But soon they started admitting women. I guess maybe there weren't enough young men. And then they made it more of a long-term resident hotel by the time O'Keefe and Stieglitz moved in there. So they lived there many years in the 1930s. And if you look out, you'll see that building on the left is 570 Lex. That's at that time was the RCA building. I left it. I used to work in that building back in 1970 or so. I think the Sheldon was like 545 Lexington. And I do remember the Sheldon. It had a bar, and they served a drink called the Swirler Martini. And it was this enormous thing. I never had one. I really, even when I was young, that didn't look safe to me. That was their claim to fame. Today, by the way, it's still there, but it's been renovated and it's student housing. I guess for students in that area. I don't know that it's affiliated with any particular school, but that's what it is. It's student housing today. 291. I just give you a list of who was there, which was really everybody, and besides Stieglitz and Steitch and those other people are all well-known early 20th century photographers. Paul Strand, we'll look at some of his work in a minute. Baron de Meyer, who really wasn't a baron, but he became the go-to guy in the 1930s and 40s in Hollywood. He would do all the movie stars, but he was a contributor back then to 291 Gallery. And then painters, I mean, you can just look at the list. I think you recognize most of them. And I'm no expert, and I recognize them, so it's quite a lineup. And Stieglitz had very good connections throughout the art world, and he had the best artists in the world exhibiting their work at his place. And of course, more painters. I mean, John Marin, Manston Hartley, Arthur Doe. You go into the Metropolitan or you go to the MFA in Boston, you'll see their work hanging there alongside O'Keeffe's. This was the lineup of pre-war American artists. Now, just a few of his close associates. Here's Paul Strand, who, again, he was also Jewish. He was from New York, of a middle-class family. And, Stieglitz almost felt like he was his son in a way, but things got a little dicey because, Paul wound up having an affair with Georgia O'Keeffe, and they had to be careful supposedly Stieglitz wouldn't find out, but I think he knew. I mean, he was getting old. I mean, he was a generation older than Georgia, and probably couldn't keep up with what she wanted. So she turned to Paul Strand. But he was one of the social conscious photographers of his day. And this is a very famous photograph of his. This blind woman, New York. And this poor woman has a badge, as you see, underneath her chin with a number. And that is a license. Yeah, begging was quite legal, but you had to get a license first. And I guess she had to demonstrate that she really was blind. And then I wonder what they charged for the license. But that's the way they worked things back then. There wasn't any welfare, but you got a license to beg. And this is the probably the most famous photograph by Paul Strand. That's of course the Morgan Bank on Wall Street, taken across the street where George Washington's statue is, and it looks like so foreboding, right? It looks like these big black squares are going to suck the people into the bank or something. Years ago, I went down there. I thought, oh, I wonder if I can duplicate that. And there's a newspaper kiosk on that street now, and also they built a lot of buildings. I don't think the light reaches there anymore. It's hard to tell because I think this is in the winter. They have coats on. Looks like the morning because the sun's in the west. In the east. So, I wasn't there with those conditions, but he went on to do a lot of good work with, supporting various social causes with his photography. Edward Steichen, now he was a brilliant photographer. I donated some books, and I saw one of them. I think is still in the studio, Edward Steichen's portraits. But he's very famous for portraits. He was also just quite a guy. He was born in Luxembourg, so of course he favored the Allied cause in the beginning of World War I, and Stieglitz favored Germany. And they had really a split over that. But he wound up in the Army Air Corps, and he took aerial photographs of the front lines with his camera, drooped over the side of the plane, and he pioneered that. I'm amazing that he was able to do that with that style equipment. But apparently he was very successful. And then years later, he was also in the Navy in World War II. He was in charge of naval photography in the Pacific aboard combat ships. And he was in his 60s by that time. And he almost got killed on an aircraft carrier. He and a companion had to jump quite a distance to avoid a plane crashing where they were standing, and he got banged up a bit. So he wasn't afraid to risk his life for his country and I guess for his photographs as well. Here's one of his favorite famous ones of J.P. Morgan. He took several of Morgan. He really captures his intensity. And of course, he's probably the most famous, Garbo, 1928. And I think that's soon after talkies were introduced. So he did Greta Garbo. Now we'll look at Gertrude Kassebayer. She's from grew up in the Midwest and also in Colorado, and was married to a very successful businessman, had a lot of money, and they became estranged because he supported her in the beginning with her photography and artwork. She was also going to art school, but eventually he said, well, what about me? And I guess they didn't want to have a divorce, so he just went his separate ways. He had I guess other women in his life, but he continued to support her and what she was doing. So she went to art school at in New York at Pratt Institute. She was 37, so that's pretty late to go to school. But She went on to great success, probably the most successful woman photographer um, of that era. Um, Certainly in the United States, and I don't know about Europe, but maybe worldwide. Um, Very famous for pictures of American Indians. She was familiar with Indians from her time living in Colorado. And she took pictures of Indians in the Buffalo Bills Wild West show, which she didn't use to support the show. She thought that was kind of crass, but she did say, I guess she sold them later to private collectors. Here's another example of Stieglitz's personality and getting in the way. And they were very close friends, and he helped her. And then he criticized her for being too commercial, and and then they ceased to be friends and collaborate. But she definitely had her stuff um, in his studio. Also, he helped her in Newport, Rhode Island. Of course, the rich people would go there every summer, and he knew a lot of these people, and he wrote letters of introduction for her. So, and she was able to get commissions from many of them for portraits. So she'd go up to Newport, for the season, rent a studio somewhere, and set herself up, and she did quite well for herself. Now she was older than Stieglitz, so about 12 years older, I think. But I said, unfortunately, they had a falling out in the end. That's one of her portraits of Buffalo Bill's entourage. Now here, Evelyn Nesbit, I took this in because I thought at first it was a very modern portrait. I mean, she has period hair and dress, but the way she's looking at the camera very forcefully, to me, it looks like, could have been taken yesterday. Evelyn Nesbit was involved with a terrible scandal that involved Stanford White. Stanford White was the leading architect in New York and one of the leading architects in the United States. He designed the first Madison Square Garden when it was at Madison Square, designed many of the Fifth Avenue mansions, including the Villard Mansion, which still exists. It's the last one on Fifth Avenue. That's right in front of Trump Tower. That used to be the residence of the Archdiocese of New York for many years, and then they moved out so Trump could build his tower in back of it. But he had to preserve that building. But at any rate, let's say Stanford White was it was with McKim, Mead and White was the name of the firm, and he was a member of the Union League Club. As I said, well known, well respected, had a good personality. I guess people liked him. And then apparently, though, he was seducing these young women, and he went after this Evelyn Nesbit. She was 16 and he was 40 something. And of course, he was a very wealthy, powerful man, and they had an affair and so forth. And then she claimed that he had drugged her and then taken sexual advantages. And she told this to her husband, which is a guy named Harry Thor. And 3 years after this picture was taken, she and her husband were having dinner. It was some kind of affair, some celebration. on a roof garden in Madison Square Garden. There was a restaurant on top of it. And who's there but Stanford White? And this Harry Thor was a man who was unbalanced. And he pulled out a gun, walked over to Stanford White, and shot him dead, right in the middle of this event. He was, of course, arrested. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity and spent the rest of his life in an institution. But then the police said, well, we have to investigate this. So they went into Stanford White's apartment, and he had one room rigged up with a swing, a big swing from the ceiling, and apparently used this in some kind of erotic arrangement with these women that he was taking advantage of. And apparently there were quite a few of them. So does this sound familiar? Nothing's really changed. At any rate, that is the young lady who was the centerpiece of this awful scandal. And I don't know who. I wonder who paid for the picture. I don't know if it was Stanford White or not. Anyway, find an American Place, what takes is the last part of his active life, and a lot of people are now coming in that you would recognize. Ansel Adams had a big show there in 1936. Stieglitz liked his style very much. Paul Strand, continued to work with him. They had a falling out, but they kind of mended their fences. Dorothy Norman, Stieglitz's close associate. Now she was 2 generations removed from Stieglitz. As a woman in her 20s, from a wealthy family. She married and had children. I don't think there was any physical relationship there, but she actually helped him. She was doing all the administrative work after a while when he really couldn't do it anymore. And certainly O'Keeffe wasn't about to do it, and she didn't like Dorothy Norman at all. So she was very happy to spend half the year in New Mexico. I don't think Dorothy Norman was a bad person. I think she was just, today we consider her like a groupie. She just was admired by the great, admired the great Stieglitz, and wanted to try to help him. And we said the painters, we've seen that list before. They were, again, they continued for many years with Stieglitz right up to the end. Now, finally, we get to, I guess, the one event where you can say this is where photography became an art form. I mean, everything Stieglitz had done up to 1928 was pushing this reality forward. And I think the Metropolitan Museum had already acquiesced to the idea. It's not like he had to beat them over the head. They wanted photographs, and they wanted to start displaying them. But they didn't want to purchase them. I don't know whether it was they're too cheap or what, because they certainly purchased paintings. So Stieglitz contrived a scheme where he got some wealthy donors to underwrite donations by third parties to the museum and make it look like it. So it not supposed to come from Stieglitz. It's not like he was giving away his stuff. So, okay, fine. This arrangement satisfied Stieglitz and I guess some of the other people involved. It saved face in the art community. I guess people were very sensitive back then. They didn't want to look like they wanted photographers to be started to be treated like real artists and not like say poor second cousins or something. And then he made subsequent donations. The Metropolitan certainly has the biggest collection of his art, and after his death, Georgia O'Keeffe curated his work and gave further photographs to the Met. Now, just summarizing, yes, he certainly had unwavering passion and vision. He was a bit of a fanatic, but people who do great, who are very good at something and do achieve great things, most of them are, or many of them are one-dimensional. You're not going to get a Renaissance man or woman to be a real pioneer and do things that haven't been done before. He was able to not only promote photography as art form, he also got Americans to open their eyes and accept, say, Impressionists and other Cubism, other art forms from Europe. His gallery wasn't the only one, but it certainly was the leading one in the United States. And New York was the center of artwork at that time. I guess maybe in some ways it still is. But as I said, he certainly was a fanatic, but he must have had some charisma as well, or people wouldn't have put up with him. Qualities of man, he certainly was opinionated and difficult, and he caused himself a lot of problems, more than other people, really. He wasn't very faithful to his first wife, that's for sure. And he could have done a better job there, but just the fact that he and her were just put together for the convenience of the two families without asking them whether they wanted to be married or not. And unfortunately, that's what can happen. Self-centered, he was certainly, as I said before, he wanted to be the owner, general manager, and quarterback. The self-centered idealist, sometimes selfish, controlling, deeply flawed. Okay, I think that's it.
I think if you stop sharing, we can see everybody's face.
Yeah.
All right.
There we are.
Okay. Questions, discussions, comments?
Well, you certainly did a lot of research, Jim. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, well, he's a complex guy, and he lived a long time, and he did a lot. So maybe it would have been better just to cover the time prior to World War I or something like that.
But I think you got to the essence. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
I think you did a great job, Jim. And, you know, he was such an important figure to bringing abstract art to the United States and to photography. I mean, and his relationship with Georgia O'Keeffe was incredibly complex, as it was to Steichen. And, you know, Georgia was best friends with Steichen's wife. I personally have followed everything about Georgia O'Keeffe. I've been to all of her houses in New Mexico and to her museum multiple times. And I mean, they were a fascinating couple. They really were. And very important to art in America. They were extremely important figures. And I mean, some of his images are so beautiful and so amazing. And to have taken that picture with people smiling and laughing with a huge camera is amazing. And you did a really nice job. Really nice job.
Have you ever heard of this book, An American Romance? O'Keeffe and Stieglitz?
No, I haven't.
It's by the authors Benita Eisler, Eisler.
When was that published? Do you know?
I don't know, 20 years or more ago.
20 years ago? Okay, I missed that one.
Let me see, I have it here. So let's see if I can. 1991.
1991.
Yeah, I've got a copy. But,
And it was called An American Romance?
An American Romance.
Romance,
And
okay.
the author is Benita. Benita. Eisler.
Okay. Sounds interesting. I would love to read it.
Well, it says O'Keeffe and Stieglitz, An American Romance. Maybe that's the entire title.
Okay.
Okay.
Jim,
But yeah.
Jim,
Thank
I thought
you.
it was good that you included the other artists and photographers
Yes.
that he surrounded himself, because many people say that his influence on America was much more than him being a photographer, that his photographs were good, but it was his networking ability that he did bring in all the European modern artists, and that he networked these people, and the studios, or his shops became the centers, and that without his influence, we wouldn't have advanced with American art and appreciation of modern art the way we did without his leadership. And so it was good that you brought in all those other people, because it was their meshing of all of them that changed the trajectory.
No, and getting those photographs into the Metropolitan Museum collection was huge. Huge. It's really good.
Yeah, I wonder if I haven't been to the Met in a long time. I wonder if they show any of them.
They used to have a few of his up, but I haven't been there in years. So, yeah. I can't imagine they still don't have at least one up. Probably Steerage is probably still up.
Yeah, that's a photograph of people leaving the United States too. It's not coming in. But he was on. I think that was on a trip with him and his wife going to Europe. It may have been their honeymoon. But yeah, he noticed that, and then he had to run back to his cabin and grab a camera and run back. And fortunately, the shot was still there. But they were on a ship going to Germany.
I'll do a quick search.
All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, I wanted to Well, first of all, Jim, that was very well researched, and I
Yeah.
appreciate the presentation. Excellent. And just after you finished, I was looking around. I mean, clearly he took a lot of pictures of Georgia O'Keeffe. It made me start thinking about our creative vision thing coming up. It's interesting from what I was reading, though, she never rendered any of his pictures in her art.
No, not to my knowledge.
Apparently not. But I mean, I know her. What I knew of her was more of, it's kind of an interesting pair, the two of them, because my recollection of her was Desert Southwest, and he was all New York City. So kind of a really interesting pair.
Yeah, she did that, and of course she did a lot of famous calla lily pictures, a lot of some abstract view of plants and things
A lot of
like
mountains and rock formations and skulls.
that.
Yeah, plants. Yeah. It's hard to tell from this. I think that there is something hanging in the Met, but they have a lot of they have pictures, a lot of pictures of Georgia and cloud studies and architectural views and city views. So I think there's got to be something up in the Met.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop.
That was really good.
Yeah,
going to
they
stop.
certainly used to have a lot of these city views up, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop recording, and next month we have Jim Smith talking about Sebastião Salgado. All right.
That's a Brazilian guy, right?
That's right.
Yes. I've seen some of his work in New York, and it's amazing. He has that famous photograph of these miners on the slope of a gold. I guess it's a gold mine in Brazil. I mean,
I
it's
remember that.
unbelievable.
All right.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, fellas. Good night.
Thank you, Sashi.
Good night. Good night.
For